Friends, welcome to Tuesday. I have the next part of Ramona and Beezus for you today. When we left off, they were walking to the library, and Beezus was so embarrassed about Ramona. So we're going to see if she does anything else to embarrass her or if the trip goes okay. Here's a book about a duck. Wouldn't you like that? No, said Ramona in a loud voice. Beezus's face turned red with embarrassment. When everyone in the library looked at Ramona's ears and smiled, "Shh," she whispered, as Miss Greaver, the grown-ups librarian, frowned in their direction. "You're supposed to speak quietly in a library." Beezus selected another book. "Look, Ramona, here's a funny story about a kitten that falls into a goldfish bowl. Wouldn't you like that?" "No," said Ramona in a loud whisper. "I want to find my own book." If only Miss Evans, the children's librarian, were there, she would know how to select a book for Ramona. Beezus noted Mrs. Greaver glance disapprovingly in their direction, while the other grown-ups watched Ramona and smiled. "All right, you can look," Beezus agreed. To keep Ramona quiet, "I'll go find a book for myself." When Beezus had selected her book, she returned to the picture book section, where she found Ramona sitting on the bench with both arms clasped around a big, fat book. "I found my book," she said, and she held it up for Beezus to see. On the cover was a picture of a steam shovel with its jaw full of rocks. The title was Big Steve the Steam Shovel. "Oh, Ramona," whispered Beezus in dismay. "You don't want that book." "I do too," said Ramona, forgetting to whisper. "You told me I could pick out my own book." Under the disapproving stare of Mrs. Greaver, Beezus gave up. Ramona was right. Beezus looked with distaste at the big orange-colored book in the stout library binding. At least it would be due in 2 weeks. But Beezus did not feel very happy at the thought of 2 more weeks of steam shovels. And it just went to show how Ramona always got her own way. Beezus took her book and Ramona's to Miss Greaver's desk. "Is this where you pay for the books?" asked Ramona. "You don't pay for books," said Beezus. "Are you going to charge them?" Ramona asked. Beezus pulled a library card out of her sweater pocket. "I show this card to the lady, and she lets us keep the books for 2 weeks. A library isn't like a store where you buy things." Ramona looked as if she did not understand. "I want a card," she said. "You have to be able to write your own name before you can have a library card," Beezus explained. "I can write my name," said Ramona. "Oh, Ramona," said Beezus, "you can't either." "Perhaps she really does know how to write her name," said Mrs. Greaver, as she took a card out of the desk. Beezus watched doubtfully while Miss Greaver asked Ramona to name her name and age. Then the librarian asked Ramona what her father's occupation was. When Ramona didn't understand, she said, "What kind of work does your father do?" "He mows the lawn," said Ramona promptly. The librarian laughed. "I mean, how does he earn his living?" Somehow Beezus did not like to have Miss Greaver laugh at her little sister. After all, how could Ramona be expected to know what her father did? "He works for the Pacific Gas and Electric Company," Beezus told the librarian. Mrs. Greaver wrote this down on the card and shoved it across the desk to Ramona. "Write your name on this line," she directed. Nothing daunted, Ramona grasped the pencil in her fist and began to write. She bore down so hard that the tip snapped off the lead, but she wrote on. When she laid down the pencil, Beezus picked up the card to see what she had written. On the line, the card was filled in with, so that is how Ramona wrote her name. "That's my name," said Ramona proudly. "That's just scribbling," Beezus told her. "It is too my name," insisted Ramona, while Mrs. Greaver quietly dropped the card into the wastebasket. "I've watched you write it, and I know how." "Here, Ramona, you can hold my card," Beezus tried to be comforting. "You can pretend it's yours." Ramona brightened at this, and Mrs. Greaver checked out the books on Beezus's card. As soon as they got home, Ramona demanded, "Read my new book to me." And so Beezus began. Big Steve was a steam shovel. He was the biggest steam shovel in the whole city. When she finished the book, she had to admit she liked Big Steve better than Scoopy. His only sound effects were tooting and growling. He tooted and growled in big letters on every page. Big Steve did not shed tears or want to be a pile driver. He worked hard at being a steam shovel, and by the end of the book, Beezus had learned a lot about steam shovels. Unfortunately, she did not want to learn about steam shovels. Oh well, she guessed she could stand 2 weeks of Big Steve. "Read it again," said Ramona enthusiastically. "I like Big Steve. He's better than Scoopy." "How would you like me to show you how to write your name?" Beezus asked, hoping to divert Ramona from steam shovels. "Okay," agreed Ramona. Beezus found a pencil and paper and wrote "Ramona" in large, careful letters across the top of the paper. Ramona studied it critically. "I don't like it," she said at last. "But that's the way your name is spelled," Beezus explained. "You didn't make dots and lines," said Ramona, seizing the pencil. She wrote her signature. But Ramona, you don't understand. Beezus took the pencil and wrote her own name on the paper. You've seen me write Beatrice, which has an I and a T in it. See, like that. But you don't have an I or a T in your name because it isn't spelled that way. Ramona looked skeptical. She grabbed the pencil and she wrote with a flourish. So she's decided to spell her name. That's my name because I like it, she announced. I like to make dots and lines. Lying on her stomach on the floor, she proceeded to fill the paper with I's and T's. But Ramona, nobody's name is spelled with. Beezus stopped. What was the use? Trying to explain spelling and writing to Ramona was just too complicated. Everything became difficult when Ramona was around, even an easy thing like taking a book out of the library. Well, if Ramona was happy thinking her name was spelled with only I's and T's, she could go ahead and think it. The next 2 weeks were fairly peaceful. Ramona and Father soon tired of tooting and growling like Beezus. They looked forward to the day Big Steve was due at the library. Father even tried to hide the book behind the radio, but Ramona soon found it. Beezus was happy that one part of her plan had worked. Ramona had forgotten the little steam shovel now that she had a better book. On Ramona's second trip to the library, perhaps Miss Evans could find a book that would make her forget steam shovels entirely. As for Ramona, she was perfectly happy. She had 3 people to read a book she liked, and she spent much of her time covering sheets of paper with I's and T's. Sometimes she wrote in pencil, sometimes she wrote in crayons, and one time she wrote in ink until her mother caught her at it. Finally, to the relief of the rest of the family, the day came when Big Steve was to be returned. Come on, Ramona, said Beezus. It's time to go to the library for another book. I have a book, said Ramona, who was lying on her stomach writing her version of her name on a piece of paper with purple crayon. No, it belongs to the library, Beezus explained, glad that for once Ramona couldn't possibly get her own way. It's my book, Ramona said, crossing T's with a flourish. Beezus is right, dear, observed Mother. Run along and get Big Steve. Ramona looked sulky, but she went to the bedroom. In a few minutes she appeared with Big Steve in her hand and a satisfied expression on her face. It's my book, she announced. I wrote my name in it. Mother looked alarmed. What do you mean, Ramona? Let me see. And she took the book and opened it. Every page in the book was covered with enormous purple I's and T's in Ramona's very best handwriting. Mother, cried Beezus, look what she's done, and it's in crayon so it won't erase. Ramona Quimby, said her mother, you're a very naughty girl. Why would you do something like that? It's my book, said Ramona stubbornly. I like it. Mother, what am I going to do? Beezus demanded. It's checked out on my card, and I'm responsible. They won't let me take any more books out of the library, and I have nothing to read, and it will all be Ramona's fault. She always is spoiling my fun, and it isn't fair. Beezus didn't know what she would do without her library card. She just couldn't get along without library books. She couldn't, that was all. I did not spoil your fun, stormed Ramona. You have all the fun. I can't read, and it isn't fair. Ramona's words ended in a howl as she buried her face in her mother's skirt. I couldn't read when I was your age, and I didn't have someone read to me all the time, so it is too fair, argued Beezus. You always get your way because you're the youngest. I do not, said Ramona, and you read all the time. You're mean. See them arguing right there. I am not mean, Beezus shouted back. Children, cried her mother, stop it, both of you. Ramona, you are a very naughty little girl. A loud sniff came from Ramona, and Beezus, her mother, continued, the library won't take your card away from you. If you'll get my purse, I'll give you some money to pay for the damage to the book. Take Ramona along with you, explain what happened, and the librarian will tell you how much to pay. This made Beezus feel better. Ramona sulked all the way to the library. When they got there, Beezus was pleased to see that Mrs. Evans, the children's librarian, was sitting behind the desk. Mrs. Evans was the kind of librarian who would understand about little sisters. Hello, Beatrice and Miss Evans. Is this your little sister I've heard so much about? Beezus wondered what Miss Evans had heard about Ramona. Yes, this is Ramona, she said. She went on hesitantly. And Miss Evans, I'm a bad girl, interrupted Ramona, smiling willingly at the library. How are you? Said Mrs. Evans. What did you do? I wrote in a book, said Ramona, not in the least bit ashamed. I wrote in purple crayon, and it will never, ever erase. Never, never, never. Embarrassed, Beezus handed Mrs. Evans Big Steve the steam shovel. Mother gave me the money to pay for the damage, she explained. The librarian turned the pages of the book. Well, you didn't miss a page, did you? She finally said to Ramona. No, said Ramona, pleased with herself, and it will never ever. I'm awfully sorry, interrupted Beezus. After this, I'll try to keep the library books where she can't reach them. Mrs. Evans consulted a file of little cards in the drawer. Since every page in the book was damaged, the library could no longer use it. I'll have to ask you to pay for the whole book. I'm sorry, but that is the rule. It will cost $2.50. $2.50. What a lot of things that would have bought, Beezus reflected as she pulled the 3 folded dollar bills out of her pocket and handed them to the librarian. Mrs. Evans put the money in the drawer and gave Beezus 50 cents in change. Then Mrs. Evans took a rubber stamp and stamped something inside the book. By twisting her head around, Beezus could see that the word was discard. There, said Mrs. Evans, as she pushed the book across the desk. You have paid for it, so now it's yours. Beezus stared at the librarian. You mean to keep? That's right, said Mrs. Evans. Ramona grabbed the book. It's mine! I told you it was mine! Then she turned to Beezus and said triumphantly, You said people didn't buy books at the library, and you just bought me one. Buying a book and paying for damage are not the same thing, Mrs. Evans pointed out to Ramona. Beezus could see that Ramona didn't care. The book was hers, wasn't it? It was paid for and she could keep it. It's not fair, thought Beezus. Ramona should not get her own way when she had been naughty. But Miss Evans, protested Beezus, if she spoils a book, she shouldn't get to keep it. Now every time she finds books she likes, she will. Beezus did not go on. She knew very well what Ramona would do, but she was not going to say it out loud in front of her. I see what you mean, Miss Evans thought. Give me the book, Ramona, she said. Doubtfully, Ramona handed her the book. Ramona, do you have a library card? Miss Evans asked. Ramona shook her head. Then Beezus must have taken out the book on her card, said Miss Evans. So the book belongs to Beezus. Why, of course. Why hadn't she thought about that before? It was her book, not Ramona's. Oh, thank you, said Beezus gratefully, as Mrs. Evans handed the book to her. She could do anything she wanted with it. For once, Ramona didn't know what to say. She scowled and looked as if she were building up to have a tantrum. You've got to read it to me, she said at last. Not unless I feel like it, said Beezus. After all, it's my book. And she couldn't resist adding, That's no fair, Ramona added, as if she were about to haul. It is too fair, said Beezus calmly, and if you have a tantrum, I won't read it to you at all. Suddenly, as if she had decided Beezus meant what she said, Ramona stopped scowling. Okay, she said cheerfully. Beezus watched her carefully for a minute. Yes, she really was being agreeable, thought Beezus with a great feeling of relief. And now that she did not have to read Big Steve unless she wanted to, Beezus felt she would not mind reading it once in a while. Come on, Ramona, she said. Maybe I'll have time to read it to you before Father comes home. Okay, said Ramona happily as she took Beezus's hand. Mrs. Evans smiled at the girls as they started to leave. Good luck, Beatrice, she said. And we'll read chapter 2 tomorrow.